Hey everyone, how's it going? I'm Nate Houghton, co-founder of Incendium. Welcome to our Growth Accelerator here on the 23rd of January. I'm excited to welcome Ben Bilbrough from The Best Answer to join us. Ben is one of our customers. I'm excited to hear a little bit about what you're building with The Best Answer, but welcome, Ben. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for inviting me, Nate.
And you're based in New York.
Based in New York, but at the moment I'm up in the Catskills just to, torture myself with cold and snow for a few
I
months.
was going to say, you need a little more polar vortex to stay.
Yeah.
So I wanted to start with, I'm curious to learn or to share with others a little more about your background. I know you joined The Best Answer as CEO maybe 4 or 5 months ago at this point, if that long.
Almost 6, yeah.
Okay, almost 6 months ago. We can get into that as well. But how did you arrive here? What has your career been like? How do you end up getting in a position where you're kind of plugged in as a CEO of an existing company? I think it's something that's a little bit unique compared to some people we talk to as well.
Yeah. So serial founder. This is number 5 for me. Technically number 5 for me.
Cool.
And my previous experience has all been in sort of advertising and ad tech and marketing. And I founded my previous last company 8 years ago and exited in 2021. And the experience of that is really kind of what brought me to this new thing. And as founders, I think a lot of you will appreciate, especially founders who have been through an exit, like nothing brings to light more clearly the difference between a big company culture and a startup culture than an acquisition. Right? Because like by definition, small companies, startups need to be highly functional. Like you need to be in alignment all the time. And if you're not, it's really quick and easy to get snapped back into it until you hit a certain point. And it's usually around 25 employees where you start to realize that it's not that easy to keep everybody all aligned all the time. So then you need processes and tools to do that. My company got acquired. We were acquired by a bigger company, but not a huge company, 400 people. And the literal and figurative culture shock of that for my team was like, wow, like how can we not all have a shared definition of winning? How can we not all having trouble figuring out how these departments work together? And it was just, classic bigger company sort of culture creep that had happened. So I stuck that out for a year. Again, if you've been through this, you got a nerd out period. Stuck it around for a year. At the end of it, the CEO came to me and asked me if I would run product for the larger company. And I agreed with a caveat, which is we got to run a process. We have to have a system in place where we can actually have agreements across the board and a shared understanding of like what's important right now. And, what does winning look like actually? Which is not easy to do in a 400-person company that has become siloed and fractionalized. And that process of doing that, which, full disclosure, was not successful.
It rarely is. Yeah, rarely is.
It's really hard to do from within the company because I was viewed as like, you're the product guy. Like you've got a point of view on this, When I left, I thought, this is something that companies need. This is something that sort of small to mid-sized companies, they need a process run. And I started doing that on a consulting basis. And then I met the founder of The Best Answer, who owns a venture studio, who invited me and said, like, listen, you're doing this thing. We seem really aligned on purpose. And I candidly was starting to feel the edges of like, listen, if you're a founder, like you're all about scale, like step and repeat. Like, how do we do things that grow and build? And consulting businesses are, it's hard to do. It feels good, but
I think by definition, they kind of get a certain point, right? It's like
yes. And again, there's the business cap, but there's also the human cap of like, I'm doing a thing and then I stop, and then I'm doing a thing and then I stop. And we love engines, like we love machines, we love to build things. Founders do. So that's how I met, the folks at The Best Answer, and sort of very quickly realized that this was a suite of tools that was right-sized for companies that are just starting to feel the edges of misalignment.
Yeah, I think to your point, there's this guy, I'm forgetting his name, who does these funny videos on LinkedIn where, one of them, he was impersonating a startup employee who joins a big company, and he's on like a Zoom call, and he's like, yeah, no, I think we can have this ready for Tuesday, maybe Wednesday at the latest. And Q3? Okay, yeah, sure. Q3. It's like it's just a totally different framing of everything that you're doing, and I think that it's interesting you point out that 25 point. I've spent pretty much my whole career below that, so it's interesting to kind of hear that that's the point at which that that misalignments to happen. I guess one thing I would ask before we get into the best answer is, you mentioned that it was hard to get that up and running with the 400-person company. Were there elements that you have seen work, or that you think given more time could work, or even bits and pieces of that process that did work well? Like, are there any quick things that can be helpful for alignment with a large company, or is it really no?
I mean, I guess what I learned from the experience is, like, find the things that are already somewhat in place and improve them.
Right.
Because introducing brand new things, like, the lift is so heavy. Like, it's just hard to, like, I'll give you a great example. We'll talk a little bit about OKRs when we start talking about the best answer. But companies that do OKRs well can't imagine not doing them.
Right.
Companies that have tried to do OKRs and have, like, but are starting to feel the, the burden of them. Right. Like, it's a lot of thinking and a lot of writing, and then a lot of coordination, and then a lot of follow up. Helping them improve their OKR practice is actually far easier than going to a company that has, some other goal setting structure, top down goal setting structure. So that's like the layup. Like, if you can say, like, hey, what are the things that you're doing that look like this already, and sort of dig in and improve them. But candidly, the biggest thing that companies of any size can and should do, this is like the easy stuff, is get the leadership together in a room and figure out what are the 4 things that matter most right now at as high level as possible. And what you'll typically find, and this is what I found is doing this as a consultant, is that there's a lot of daylight between what people think is important. There is certain interest sometimes in keeping that daylight between them. Like, marketing thinks this, and product thinks that, and operations thinks this. And sometimes as leadership team, that feels good. Like, that feels like dynamic tension, but it's not. Like, at the end of the day, the best run companies are the ones that say, we all have opinions about it, but we're going to state the 4 things. Like, 1, what are we optimized for right now? 2, what are we famous for? What is the thing that we will be known for that we will do? And the other 2 that typically have something to do with, like, your go-to-market motion and your culture. If you can state those really, really clearly, and then translate those into a deck that says, we're saying this is what we say it means. And by the way, these are the things that it doesn't mean. And it also means these are the things that we're going to say no to all of the time. Then now a leadership team can't be pulled apart. Like, that leadership team now is, like, locked in, and you can do things like, like set objectives and sort of build goals from that. Whereas without them, everybody, it's unprincipled. Like, and I don't mean that in an ethical or moral way. Just, there's nothing, it's not pinned to anything that everybody can lean into and count on.
My experience has been that what is it not part ends up getting really hard too. Because I think the affirmative statements, and not that they're easy to get to, but I have seen leadership teams get to a place where, like, yes, we agree that is good, but there's this whole bucket of other things that would be good but aren't our good things. Like, there are other companies. Good things. That's tricky. This might be a good segue into the best answer. So I'll let you.
Sure.
The pitch, like, what looks like, or how this helps, or what that.
So let me anchor everybody on the problem here. Which is, 1, employee engagement. Like, we're tired of it. Like, Forbes just came out with another article about employee engagement is now at an all-time low. And this is a known problem, but it's not a solved problem yet. Right. So zooming out, you can put that in 2 buckets, right? There are companies that are so big that employee engagement is really hard. If you work at a company with 30,000 people, it's hard to figure out how the work that you're doing every day is, helping the larger company.
That's like a citizenship at a certain point. It's like,
exactly. So they need other tricks and tools, right? Like, those big enterprises need tricks and tools of things like, I don't know, aligned incentives and things that help people feel engaged. But I truly believe, like, where we are today and where we're going, where engagement is most possible and where people can really feel really well connected to it. And Nate, I know you feel this from having worked with, smaller companies, is when you are close enough to the work and to like the purpose of the company that you can see how your work contributes. Like, that's how we all feel engaged as people too. Like, in any group that we're in, like, oh, I see what I bring. I see what value I bring to this group. Where it falls apart though is big companies have great resources. So they've got big HR teams. Like, they've got the ability to roll out like processes and programs that are all about employee engagement. So they're resourced for it, but small companies typically aren't. So when you talk to a small company, 150 people, 300 people, and you say, like, how's employee engagement? They're like, I know it's on fire, but I'm not and I actually have some ideas of what to do about it, but I'm just not resourced to fix it. And so you end up just making up for it with velocity. Like you just do more things faster, differently. And then you end up with this team of people that all sort of feel disconnected. So you don't have the resources to get something done about it. That's what I learned when I started talking to SMBs, like small and mid-sized business founders, CEOs, COOs, is like, I think we know what to do, but we're really having trouble pull the trigger on it. So if you can provide me with the tools, I'm interested. But if you can, but what I'm really missing are like the resources to get it done. Like these don't have the bandwidth. Enter AI, right? Agentic AI. This as an early use case is just what it's perfect for. Zooming out, that's what the best answer is. It is a suite of tools that are perfectly designed, to be the right size and the right level of effort for small and mid-sized businesses. But it also provides you with fully trained on your specific business and on the principle, on the guiding, on the processes, the best practices that you want to do. AI agents that are proactive and reaching out to your employees and saying like, hey, your department, OKRs are done. I've identified 2 really interesting key results that you might want to support. Shall we take a look at those? So that creates this sort of employee engagement subculture within your company that works with the employees, works with the managers, works with the leaders to basically now make this a funded mandate. Like there are actually people here to help put these programs in place and make them work. That's the best answer.
Yeah, and I think your point about people being the hero of their own story piece of this is an interesting one, where everybody wants to feel like they made the play, and it's interesting on that. I'm realizing that, and I don't do this all the time. I wish I did, but sometimes I do a good job of making a point of taking a deep breath and giving the full context to someone before I ask them to do something. And the reason for that, I think more often than not, is that then they say, "Oh, I'm the key to making this work, because if I do this thing, this unlocks all this other stuff." And generally, so work is better, probably just because they spend a little bit more time on it. It's amazing how hard that is to do with a team of 5 or 8 or 10. So certainly that gets to that point. But I was going to ask, and maybe we can get into some more the practical of exactly how this works. The other thing that you would have done historically is you almost like hire an HR hype person whose job it is to like identify each individual in the company and say, hey, here's how you're the hero. Let me tie that back to the OKRs. And what you're saying is that would have been completely impractical and ridiculous to do. But in 2025, it's not because of agentic AI. Is that practically the use case, like functionally, with how people are doing this? Yeah,
it is. I mean, imagine if you had somebody on your team that was like, I love OKRs. I know how they work. I'm really, really good at them. And by the way, a companion piece of OKRs is highly productive one-on-one meetings for persistent feedback for everybody in the organization, right? You had somebody on your team that's like, I'm really, really good at those. In fact, I'm going to sit in on your one-on-ones and I'm going to keep track of like what you talked about and make sure that the agenda continues to like build on the good work that we've done on the previous ones.
Right.
And even things like surveys for the organization. I think probably everyone can relate to being at a company where leadership sent out a survey. And once you got over your fear of, can I answer this thing honestly? You did it. And then a month later, it's crickets, right? Like no follow-up items, nothing to be done there. That is just a lack of bandwidth with a big company. 100%. With a medium-sized company.
I think with any company, like when we've done surveys, like I do look at them. I always have with many people, right? So I'll kind of see what it is. And then I've always found this decision point whenever we've done this where it's usually late, right? And I really try to make an honest effort to say, okay, is there something I can pull out of this? Is this something I can even do something about? And the most I can usually do if I'm really pushing myself to be like, I care about people and I want to be the best I can, is to make a note to like keep an eye on something, which is sort of hard to do and also not really actionable. And it's,
and invisible.
It's totally invisible. And sometimes at my very best, I'll be like, hey, this is what I saw and this is what I'm keeping an eye on. But even then I can really see how agentic AI is better than me at kind of a thing, which is really interesting.
And interestingly, it's also better at writing them. because it can take from the collective knowledge of the entire internet, anybody who's done these things, and pull it together and say, like, this is actually the right length, and this is the right format, and these are the right questions to ask your team based on the interview that I had with you, leader of the company. So let's find the answers to them. It then processes them. So the day after the survey is done, there are results ready to be reviewed, and then says, I've identified 4 action items. Now, the leader is still, again, the leader still has to act on that.
Sure.
But that, now all of a sudden you've added new sort of gravity and
you made it to a to-do list. If you're giving action items and it's a to-do list, that in some ways is so much easier than trying to create a to-do list out of information. Like, that's often the hard part.
Right.
So
right. Yeah. And also, because you're a leader of a small company, you're probably a player coach. Sure. Like, you have your own process work, your own project work, in addition to being a manager, and as are all of your managers.
Right.
So this helps sort of create the connective tissue between identifying things that need to be done, getting them in a easily distilled and understood way to your managers. So now your managers can be like, oh, I didn't even have time to think about that. Like, but now I've got a thing to act on. Like, I should do something about this, which, again, at the end of the day, that is employee engagement. Like, I feel heard, I feel seen, and I feel respected because I've been let in on, like, what's the company actually trying to do here, and how does my work contribute to it? That's what we all love about small companies. That's the thing that can actually be maintained up through larger companies if they're well, and agentic AI provides that.
And in terms of the best things and how it's set up, is this a matter of, maybe the best way to ask this is, do you find that you're showing up at companies and saying, what system do you have in place? We can run that with more efficiency. Or is it more, here are some best practices that we would recommend you do that we also can kind of run for you? I'm interested in, and I know that we've talked a little bit about how coaches and consultants can play into this as well. So I'm interested, like, where you pick it up as the product.
Yeah. So, well, first, it is interesting. Here's what nobody wants. Another thing to log into.
Sure.
Right. Like in 2025, when you show up and say, like, I've got a SaaS solution for you, and they're like, all right, like another thing to train our people on, another thing to have all the eye rolls at the all hands. That, like, oh, we're doing another thing, another software thing. So how we design the best answer is this. Listen, agentic AIs, agents need something to, like, work in. So the actual platform is now to be used by AI through APIs, right? So it shows up in the communication tools that your employees already use. So it pops up in Slack and says, like, hey, it's Friday. Do you want to take? Should we hop on a Zoom call and go over your highlights and lowlights of the week, as a good employee engagement specialist would do, or like update your progress on your OKRs, right? So it's a proactive thing, but it's happening through Slack. So there's it's like a person on your team shows up and says, like, I'm just chatting with you and let's get this done.
Right.
Agent then goes back and updates the software. So the software is really behind the scenes. Yeah. Which one lowers a barrier immediately for people, to implement it, because now there's nothing to learn, there's nothing to log into. So that's the first thing. The second, in terms of consultants, is this. Listen, software doesn't change behavior. Like, at the end of the day, like, software addresses known behavior and gives people tools to do it. But if your feeling is, I just need to be convinced, like, I don't even think this is a thing that I have the bandwidth, the time, or the attention to deal with. Software is just, it's an option that you're just not going to seek out and do anything about. Consultants fill that void. And there's so many really great consultants, like me, having done it for, 7 months as a total, like, figuring it out on the fly. I met some amazing consultants that I thought, like, one, this is not the career for me, and two, they're so much better than me. Like, they know all. Right. So that's what we're exploring now. Is, like, how do we actually use this tool, this powered by AI, and put it in the hands of consultants. So when they're meeting with clients, when they're hearing that, like, I don't have the bandwidth to do it, like, a consultant can't fill bandwidth. They just can't. Like, most of them, like, they're not staffed that way. No. Yeah. They can do it for them.
So that's a nice segue. And I guess the last set of things I was curious to hear about, just, we're obviously on the growth, on the go-to-market side. So if you switch gears and think about, I guess, one, I'm interested in what this has looked like up to the point when you arrived. Like, how did the company grow? Where did the customers come from? And then two, from your vantage point as a CEO, kind of what are the things that are running? How do you see them tying together? To what extent are you seeing a mix of sales-led versus product-led efforts, and then even this new plan, almost partnerships with consultants, how that looks as well.
Yeah. All right. So candidly, our original thesis was that software would do the work.
Sure.
Like that, our original thesis.
A lot of people's was. Yeah.
if we put the right tools in people's hands, like
Yeah.
this is what they've been waiting for, this is what they've been looking for. As fellow founders, I don't know what's going on with my lighting here, but sorry.
Oh, you're good.
As like a witness, as fellow founders can appreciate, like that founder-led sales process is the ultimate learning experience. Like when you actually start talking to 30, 40, 50 people and truly in with your eyes open and saying, like, founder to founder, tell me what you're seeing here and tell me what you like and what you don't like about this. I think we as founders have an unfair advantage in selling B2B because we have that ability to connect to other founders and CEOs and leaders on a, like, just grown-ups here. Like, let's talk about this. I'm not selling and you're not buying. We're just talking.
Right.
That was for me. Mm-hmm. Where I learned very quickly that software wasn't going to rule the day. Like this was not going to be if you build it, they will come. And I built companies that are like that. Like I built, like Addy, the marketplace was solving a clear and immediate and obvious pain point for people that wanted to do advertising. That by showing up and saying all those things that you hate about buying advertising, we've solved them. Here you go. Here's your login. It's free. Like that was a great thing for inbound marketing. Mm-hmm. I learned very quickly with this that because there's impetus, because there does require some convincing with this, that we needed a sales motion. But again, if you sold to SMB, it's all about unit economics, right? Like you can have a sales motion, but you had better figure out a way to get that CAC below, that realistic expected quick return. And then I started working with you, which was really interesting because you gave me a way to start having conversations with people outside of our network by doing the program that we're doing, which was, it's been super insightful, like to look at it and say like, oh, who's actually invisibly engaging, but now they're visible. Like I can actually see who cares about this.
Yeah. I've been interesting, looking at just the numbers across all the different companies we work with and kind of where there are pockets of engagement and what that looks like and what the strength is. I do think it's harder than ever in some ways, or at least harder than it was in the last 10 years to do B2B growth and B2B marketing, particularly into SMBs. But yeah, I think that data on where's the path of least resistance in some ways can be insightful as well. Are you thinking about, maybe I should ask what the team is like now on your go-to-market side, and just to kind of contextualize for other people, listening in terms of who's doing what. Obviously, you're doing a lot of this as well. As you think about where meetings are coming from and what the motion is and how much of that is built, how much of that is getting built. And I'm always kind of curious how founders or how CEOs are thinking about that.
Yeah. So again, the company was spun up from a venture. So I have back office support. So I don't have to think about
which is important, by the way, I think in terms of how this gets going. That actually is pretty critical to the growth story.
And a new one for me. Like, listen, I'm used to either bootstrapping or having to get out there and like beat the bushes for money to bring an idea to life. This was the first time where like I showed up and there was infrastructure in place. Yeah, so on the technology standpoint, the people who built it were, they're not my employees, but they are employees of the venture studio. So I have resources. I don't have to think about even things like culture fit, like what's the full stack? Do I need full stack? What do I need to build this thing? And so that's kind of cool. Like it's a nice shortcut. And even operational stuff like, finance and, like managing payroll and that type of thing is not on my to-do list because that's being managed by, a CFO from the venture studio. So it gave me kind of the opportunity to really just focus on go-to-market, which again, from a founder's perspective, like go-to-market and fundraising, because while it is, a venture funded or a venture studio like product, our model was to then like, let's get validation from the market. Like let's bring other money in, which, pretty normal. So the team's small, and the process of doing founder-led sales has led me to understand better what the shape of it needs to be. You hit on the consultant thing a minute ago. I want to just dig into that a little bit deeper.
Yeah.
Here's what we also found from like employee and culture consultants and having spoken to a lot of them now. They have their own pain points, right? Which is and this is a terrible phrase. I got to find the one that's not legal that sounds better, but they have a high rate of recidivism. They go into an organization, everyone's fired up, half day,
Yeah.
they do a half day, they work with it,
Great.
like they
Yeah.
have their period of time, and then they check back in 4 months later, 5 months, they're like, yeah, we're off the wagon. Like
Yeah.
we went back to our old bad habits. And one, that's just for a consultant, right?
Mhm.
Like from their standpoint, oh, we were good, man. And we spent all this time and you guys bought into it and we put in place. But without the ongoing support and reminder and sort of proactive like approach to those things, it's
Mhm.
really easy to fall back on old bad habits.
Yeah.
So the AI, the component of the best answer solves that problem for them. They move
Mhm.
on to their next engagement, but behind them is, for all intents and purposes, like their clone that's
Right.
going to
It's an extension of
stay in
that.
the, yeah, it's going to stay in the organization and actively, not as a chat bot of like questions about engagement. No,
Right.
proactive, like reaching out to everybody through their channels. Here's the other thing that if you're consulting, your income is a sine wave.
I was gonna ask about this. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
This is
like
good.
it's just, like I'm busy and I'm making money, and then I got to take the next month to load the wagon, and then
Mhm.
I'm busy and now I'm loading the wagon. So your pay looks like this, which is stressful, especially if you're trying to show up as, has been, and the person that can help sort of bring, a level of lack of less stress to an organization, like so this concept of plugging in a platform that has subscription costs lets consultants actually build on their income,
Right.
right? So I work with a company, we get things up and running. I get paid my regular, my engagement fee that I always do, and then I leave behind a team of agents who are coaches in the organization who are continuing to add value and earn me money,
And you
right?
should get paid for that, right?
And
As
you
a,
should.
absolutely. You're continuing to do that. That's super interesting.
And companies seem inclined to do that because it feels like a really reasonable insurance policy that the work that we've done will work, and it takes the burden off their managers.
Right.
Those player coaches that are already overworked and like don't need another thing to keep in mind to report on. Like, nope, it's good. We have somebody right next to you who's going to be doing all this, 90% of it for you.
Mhm.
So I see a path forward where consultants now view the best answer is as their partner to like improving outcomes and smoothing out their income stacks, right? You do it for
Sure.
5 companies, now you've got 5 companies paying you behind the scenes.
Yeah. Very cool. Good stuff, Ben. Well, thanks for chatting. This is really, really helpful. Bestanswer.com.
Correct.
Yep.
Yep.
Cool. If you want to check it out, we'll have this on our well. Great chatting with you. Anything else you'd like to add? Anything we missed? I think we covered most of the.
No, that's it.
Yeah.
I enjoyed this. It's fun to talk about your business.
Yeah.
So thanks.
Awesome. Our pleasure. Thanks, Ben. We'll talk to you again soon. Have a good one.
Thanks.
See you.